where a fire as a result of unattended cooking took place in the kitchen. It activated one sprinkler head, which controlled the fire. Fire department showed up, secured the sprinkler system, helped to clean up, and if the family was displaced at all, I would suspect they're only displaced for about a day, just for the sake of cleaning up. You're probably going to run into some concerns with regards to the affordability of a sprinkler system. And in general, I realize the concern. However, if you look at the price of housing in the greater Lewes, if not the greater eastern Sussex County area, it is a minor argument, in my opinion. And I deal in terms of estimates at this time because it's not a standard practice here in Delaware to build with it. So I use $2 a square foot. And if you were to take an example of the purchase of a house at a price of $250,000, and to avoid the mortgage insurance on it, you're going to finance $200,000. Well, the market these days is very accommodating with regards to that, and with including all the options that you would want and such, the standard size of a new home being built these days is about 2,400 square feet. You're adding $4,800 to the price of the house, and either incorporated within the financing or separately, however you want to think about it. But the specifics of it, in this market today, to add the financing of 4,800 square feet over a 30-year mortgage is going to add $20 a month to your mortgage, which on an average, using average of 30 days per month, you're talking 67 cents. And then in addition to that, the homeowner certainly would be encouraged to pursue with their insurance company whatever discounts are available. And nationally, that ranges from anywhere from 5 to 13% on homeowners' insurance premiums. I could pretty much take up way too much of your time this evening to discuss the benefits of the sprinkler systems specifically to occupants, absolutely. Specific to their property. And, you know, as you know, every person's home is their castle and everything is important to them. I can continue the conversation with regards to the effects that I'm sure these gentlemen are much better versed at discussing than I am, but the impact of on your water systems and on your wastewater systems. When that activation takes place, and certainly as seen in the Jefferson Apartments the other day, that sprinkler head is only flowing approximately 25 gallons of water a minute. The fire hoses that the Lewes Fire Department were deploying on that fire on Peregrine Road the other day, each hose in and of itself was flowing a minimum of 150 gallons of water. So you're talking 6 times the amount of water. Outside of a municipal system, and as Sussex County is developing, you can see this continuously, water is a priced commodity. So you're seeing something that somebody paid for it. I realize you have your rates, but you know, you're not looking to profit off of that. But you're looking at a commodity that is running down the drain. Me, I'd much rather clean up from 25 gallons of water a minute instead of 150 gallons. And then I look at the services that you provide here, and you look at the impact on your wastewater system and that water flow. You know, I'm more than happy to sit here and discuss the 6 inches of water that were in the street in Magnolia when 3 houses burned several years ago. So my point being, there are many, many aspects of the benefits of residential fire sprinklers, and all last the lifetime of that property, and includes very basic minimal upkeep. As much as you're going to pay attention to your regular house plumbing, your regular electrical system and such, yes, the sprinkler system will need some minor maintenance attention as well. But in the long run, it's a huge, huge benefit to the occupants of that residency. It is a huge benefit to the first responders, not just the firefighters, but to the first responders who show up and try to have a positive effect on a fire as that fire gets started. Other aspects include flat out the time frame in which we're placed for fighting a fire. That sprinkler head is designed ideally to go off within 1 minute with the heat rising to the ceiling. And as fantastic as your fire department is in this community, the only place that they can get to with a appropriate crew and be able to deploy water in that time frame is the house next door to the firehouse at best. So there are many other aspects about that. A lot of the arguments that you will hear against this deal with parties that are involved up front on the construction of the house and the immediacy of selling that property. They are not involved in any way on the life of that property after the closing on that property. So I fully support your efforts here this evening. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come in. I'll be more than happy to answer questions as they come up through the evening, if as appropriate.
Okay.
But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming to speak to us, Mr. Eichler. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Are there questions?
Actually, Mr. Eichler, if you had some estimates around the installation, you touched on the maintenance component. Do you have any estimates around what a yearly upkeep would generally be?
That I do not.
Okay.
My suggestion would be that you would just continue the path of the initial installer, that contractor, to have their people to come back out. And the standard calls for annual maintenance. However, to be honest with you, there's really not that much to do with the system, and at most, a homeowner can do it themselves. In fact, as many home improvements come out, they're YouTube videos for doing it.
DIY.
Yes,
Right.
yes, sir.
I have a question. So the proponents of removing this language have mentioned smoke detectors. Can you talk a little bit about comparing fire sprinklers with smoke detectors, how they both work, the pluses and minuses?
Yes, absolutely. Specifically, a smoke alarm, a smoke detector, is designed to notify somebody that something has happened. And once that notification is made by that noise sounding, that smoke detector's job is done. There's no water coming out of that thing. There's no suppression efforts whatsoever. Flat out, it's finished. Specific to a sprinkler system, the ability to get that early flow of, a minimal flow of water, to control that fire. And please understand that these systems, when properly designed, are designed specific to my reference of controlling the fire. You will still need the fire department to come out. You will still need the firefighters to check to make sure that all the fire is out. And then they will certainly go into other responsibilities to assist the occupants to get things back to normal. There are correlations that can be made between notification systems, as in, you can put a gong system, bell system, on your sprinkler system if you choose to. In the design of a residential system, it's an option, okay? So, what's going to end up happening is, in a perfect world, you're actually going to receive notification from two separate and distinct systems. Your smoke alarms are going to go off, and then you're going to hear the sprinkler head pop, and you're going to have that flow of water. A larger home, I would definitely encourage having that water flow alarm placed on there. But you can have a smoke alarm going off for minutes, and nothing's happening to stop the progress of that fire. So, as much as we certainly advocate for a working smoke alarm system, and I don't want to bore you, but I can definitely take you through the evolution of the life and development of smoke alarm systems from the standalone 9-volt systems of years gone by to your new construction where you will be hardwired, interconnected with battery backups. And that development of smoke alarms is specifically because of human behavior. People get annoyed by them, so they take them down, take the batteries out, and don't bother to put them back. Yes,
Let me
ma'am.
ask you another question in regards to your systems. What do you have as information as it relates to them going off accidentally and damaging, because it is water?
Yes, ma'am. And I understand the hesitancy of that, but with proper installation, I would say that the possibility of it accidentally discharging is well within less than 5% of a chance.
Okay.
And more than likely, ma'am, the reason why it accidentally goes off is because somebody accidentally hit that head and broke the fuse out of there, as opposed to the appropriate level of heat reaching the ceiling level for it to activate as it's designed to.
Okay.
One of the questions we hear frequently is, so many of our homes are only occupied full-time in the summer, so they're absentee owners. So, picking up on Carolyn's question, is there a concern about, pipes, should people be concerned about pipes freezing and therefore the system going off because of that? Or, I know there's a wet system and a dry system, would you care to speak to that?
Yes, sir. So specifically to the standard that these systems are designed and built to, that standard is referred to the National Fire Protection Association, Nfpa 13D. That is a subsection of the overall sprinkler standard from the National Fire Protection Association. Specifically with two goals, that standard has been developed: A, for life and property protection; B, the economics of building a house. So off the bat, you decide you're going to include a sprinkler system in your house, and you want the basic bottom line system. The standard will only call for the living areas of the dwelling to be sprinklered, of which, within those living areas, they will be insulated. Certainly, whoever's building that house has the option of going beyond that. Sprinkler heads in the attic, sprinkler heads in the garage, uninsulated areas, that type of thing. The economic aspect of the standard in only calling for living areas to be sprinklered is specifically tied to the data that is on fire fatalities. Typically, people do not die in fires while they're in their attic or while they're in their garage. People die in living areas, bedrooms, hallways, down by the kitchen, in the living room, those types of things. And that's where you'll find within the standard described for how the system should be designed to protect. With that said, a good designer, and yes, there's a very slight aspect of sales to this. They will mention the water flow alarm. They will mention the necessity of installation and going beyond, if you choose to do so, in unoccupied areas. Okay, so incorporating the proper insulation, okay. Heaven forbid, it flows, nobody's home, you'll hear the alarm, and hopefully you have nice neighbors that are gonna call it in anyways. That is all specific to a wet system where water is in the pipes at all times. There are dry systems where it's nothing but air in the pipes. Those systems are typically used within mercantile and commercial occupancies. They are not used in residential occupancies. Specific to a dry system with air in the pipes, there's what's known as an actuator, which is a small pump, that when a head does open up as a result of the heat, that pump kicks on and actually forces the air out of the system, and it allows the water to flow through the system. So it's a very, very slight delay on the water flow. Your specific concern, sir, with regards to residents who only spend part of the time here, again, proper maintenance, keeping an eye on things, I really cannot see that as being a concern.
I guess the concern I've heard is power outages.
Mayor, can you pull the mic closer to
Sure,
you?
I guess the concern I've heard is power outages. It said power goes out for 3 or 4 hours or longer. And, would a system, and even if a house was insulated?
Yes, and please understand, I have my perspective in my participation with this coalition is absolutely fire service based.
Sure.
And that's my full background. I'm not an engineer, I don't design these things, I don't install these things, okay? So, just, my knowledge is available to anybody else. However, sir, specific to power outages, and your water officials will be able to speak to this, that off your municipal system, running a separate line for the sprinkler system, so that you can still address water bills. If somebody fails to pay, you can still shut their domestic water off. Some people will default to the argument, well, because you turned the water off, it's not a habitable occupancy. Well, we know where there are occupancies without running water and people are staying. Nonetheless, a separate line for that sprinkler system, and with that water supply continuing through the supply line, first of all, coming off your municipal system, there's no power outage concern there.
Right.
Okay? There are variations on sprinkler systems out in rural areas where municipal water is not available, or where a water purveyor is not providing a service, in that there would be a separate tank and pump system. That conversation would be applicable in that instance.
Great.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
This has been an excellent presentation so far. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
My question is directed to multi-family dwellings, the apartment type, the condominium type building. Are they considered, for the purpose of this kind of system, are they considered commercial or are they considered residential?
So, for a new apartment building to be built, that apartment building will actually have a sprinkler system required in it, and it will actually be designed and developed through a part of the standard referred to as Nfpa 13R. Yeah, there are all sorts of subsets to this. And actually, within the state of Delaware, it is a requirement from the state that an apartment building be sprinklered
With a wet system?
with a wet system. Yes, sir. So, in fact, it gets to be a little head scratching at times, in that for these developments that are coming online, if a developer is coming in and saying, I'm going to put 100 single-family homes there, but I'm also going to put 4 apartment buildings there. The way things are today for the majority of the state of Delaware, in a fire safety advocacy perspective, I'm suggesting somebody go rent that apartment, because they would be better protected than they would be in that single-family dwelling. Another aspect of your question is that within the state of Delaware, the state, through its fire codes, has regulation over every occupancy, with the exception of single-family detached homes and townhomes. Going to build apartments, you're going to follow the state, you're going to work through the state fire marshal's office on sprinkler plans, tests, acceptance, all that stuff. You're going to build townhomes, which will have the same density and such, the same style occupancy, you're living right next door to your neighbor.
Right.
At this time, not required as far as the state's concerned.
It's left to local code.
Yes, sir, it's
Yeah.
left to local codes, and that's, not to,
Yeah.
drag this down, but that's one of my challenges, is that every community has adopted their own version of the building code. Some do things on their own, as does Lewes. Others defer back to either, typically the county. So there's all sorts of crossovers and different
Right.
conversations for whoever.
I'm going to have to do a follow-up question to
Yes,
one of the events that you described that occurred, you said, at the Jefferson Apartments. Those buildings are at least 40 years old. I find it really interesting that they have a sprinkler system in there. They're fitted with those. Is that due to the fact that they were renovated approximately 10 years ago? How did they come to have sprinkler systems? Do you know?
Specifically, I do not.
Okay.
However, My question would then become, who paid for the renovations on those buildings? Were they sprinklered in the first place?
Right.
And, you know, how did that evolution come about? Because my point being is for moderate to low income housing that is built by federal funding,
Right.
they're gonna be sprinklered.
Is that a
That's an aspect.
requirement?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
That's a requirement.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. You'll find right up the road, the Milford Housing Development Corporation.
Yep.
Very active in the projects that they take on.
Yep.
And very proactive with regards to installing sprinkler systems.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
time.
Yeah, don't go away.
Stay with us. Okay, Kayla, it looks like we have a few more people joined us. What are we up to count-wise now?
You're up to 10, Mayor.
Up to 10, okay, great.
There's a hand
Thank you.
raised.
And there's a hand raised?
Yes.
Okay, can we, is there something in the chat, or just elevate the person who was speaking to join us?
Okay, so Bobby Birch, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
And you can also come on if you'd like, put your video on.
That was an error. I did not mean to raise my hand.
All right, thank you.
The corner.
Now that I'm on, I would like to ask, because I just came on late, is this thinking to make this a requirement as opposed to letting individual homeowners make their own educated decisions
That is,
about fire suppression?
that is the consideration that we're discussing, yes.
For new construction.
For new construction only.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me for raising my hand up.
No problem. All right. Are there anyone else in the audience here care to speak? Rick? Sir? Okay, first, come up, please. You're welcome to remove your mask. It might be easier for us
Thank you. I
to.
will. My name is Mark Ronnie. I'm a local builder remodeler here in Lewes with an office in Lewes. I'm one of the end users, I guess, that Paul was just referring to of putting the sprinklers in, and also a board member, past president of the Homeowners Association of Delaware. A number of years ago, I don't know the specific year, but we actually worked with the state when they tried to do this as a statewide mandate to do sprinklers. And we're not able to get that passed as something to be forced on everyone. We actually worked with the Delaware State Fire Marshal in developing a pamphlet that's given to every new homeowner by law, where we have to offer them the ability to get a sprinkler, what the cost will be for their home, and to go through that process. I'm not aware of one in particular, none for me personally. I don't believe that Shaw Brothers, being another big builder down here in Lewes and in the area, has ever gotten a homeowner to also decide to go ahead and do the sprinkler system. The costs that are usually quoted, I know Paul had just quoted $2 a square foot. I can tell you that I'm building a house right now in Broadkill Beach, which is on a municipal system. The cost for that particular system is $8.15 all in. It required a tank, it required a booster pump, required other electric systems to go along with that. And again, it is on a municipal system, you know, as well. Milton, it was over $23,000 just for that home alone.
How many square feet, please?
Just over 2,900 square feet.
That's okay.
So,
Was that a separate tax?
no, because in Broadkill Beach, a little weird, they haven't gone to all meters yet. So, in that case, not a separate tax, but that's a good point, because that's the issue that we as home builders have faced in other municipalities and other areas. It gets to be, how many water meters are you gonna run, how many taps are you gonna run, is the tap big enough to feed, you know, the water system for the sprinkler system itself. Paul had brought up maintenance, or I believe one of you might ask a question about maintenance of these systems in general. You know how hard it is just to get people to change batteries and smoke detectors, let alone do the maintenance that are required on these systems. I've had one on a house in Rehoboth that popped a joint on the 3rd floor, completely flooded the whole house. And that was for a homeowner that was living there, just happened to not be home at the time. For the homeowners that are snowbirds and that go away, you know, I've been in plenty of houses where a water line was broken, run for days and days and days before somebody finally reported it and all that, and tried to fix those things. So there's, I think, you know, there's there's many issues besides just the cost of the pipe that go into building these things in homes themselves. I know that back when we were trying to look at it with the state fire marshal said he didn't have the people to do the inspections, to do the plan reviews. They weren't gonna come in and do yearly inspections. For apartment buildings and other big buildings, townhouses and things like that, they have an HOA that manages that. They have yearly inspections that are done on those bigger systems. For each individual homeowner to have to go through an inspection service, some kind, whether it's third party or with the state, just isn't the labor force there to do that right now. And I can tell you as a person who's been waiting on one job for a dishwasher for over a year right now, with some of the things that are available, I can imagine trying to add another system, you know, to the fact of trying to build a house and trying to get something like that done. You know, I'm not trying to show any disrespect to the point of saving lives. I think we all believe that that's important. We look for a lot of low-hanging fruit to do that. It just seems like smoke detectors, when you look at the statistics, most lives that are lost in fires, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong, but are due to the fact that there weren't working smoke detectors in the homes. It wasn't due to the fact that there were no sprinklers, and I believe that what they will tell you is that the purpose of the sprinkler isn't necessarily to save the residents, although it might have a byproduct of doing that, or to save lives. It's really just to give you some more time to potentially get out of the house. That's the main purpose of having the residential sprinkler system. Let's see here if the insurance thing I cannot speak of. I, particularly with my insurance company, have not been able to get any savings for having sprinkler systems, only commercial and residential buildings as well. You know, just in terms of the maintenance, the upfront costs, and listen, you know, everybody says, well, builders make too much money. I would say that that's not necessarily true, but whatever these things cost us, we pass along. I mean, it's not money out of our pocket. It's money to the home, you know, the end user and the home buyer, you know, that's gonna have to deal with these things. And I know that we're always talking about workforce housing. The Home Builder Association of Delaware has worked a lot with the state trying to develop workforce housing for people, you know, and to add something along such as this at the beginning of the process to make things, whether it's $20 a month, you know, $40 a month, $50 a month, it's real money, you know, at the lower end of the spectrum. We're lucky that we live in an area that, you know, housing costs are high here. A lot of that has to do with land, not necessarily the price of the building itself. And I would just say, we currently, state law requires us to give everybody their choice of whether or not they want to have a sprinkler in their house, provide them the cost. People are choosing not to do that. Why is that something we want to mandate on somebody?
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions if you guys have.
I have a question for you. In the home that you described being built on Broadkill Beach, you described a cost, I think, north of $8 per square foot. Thank you. There's a big delta between what you've quoted and what the other gentleman quoted. My question is, when you were trying to find a skilled tradesman to install that system, did you have to go outside of Sussex County?
I believe we did look at one person from Maryland down in Salisbury to do the work.
Right.
Most of the current, I believe everybody else came out of the Wilmington, Newcastle County area. You know, where most of those bigger companies that are developed. But I can tell you that we actually requested prices from 4 different people. We got one back, and that was after, you know, everybody's busy right now, but after beating on people trying to get numbers back.
Right.
Right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the table?
I have a question on this is just with respect to the code itself. So if it's been in the code for 10 years, in the international code, and only 3 states have adopted it, why do you think that it continues to be in the code and hasn't been removed?
So, kind of a joke within our industry, but most people assume things are put in the codes because it's the best thing for the homeowner in the end. It's really not. It's all done by lobbyists. The codes are no different than anybody else. There's a code meeting that happens every year, or as they're developing a new code, people from those industries come and they lobby for certain things. Maybe they're a manufacturer. Hey, this new kind of breaker, if you guys are living in fairly new homes, You know, everybody has these breakers now that are like GFCIs, except they're AFCIs, you know, they're made for bedrooms and things like that, not water areas. You know, those were all done by electrical manufacturers who put these things into code, and then they kind of force those things to flow down the code. And the way the codes get adopted, it's majority rules. And the people that are on, that are voting are the people that are actually the people that are putting the codes together. It's not done by like a third party, you know, like, hey, we think this is the best thing for homeowners.
Sure. I had another question. You mentioned townhomes in part of your discussion, and the fact that those are maintained by HOAs. Are you implying then that you do support suppression systems and tighter living arrangements like townhomes?
Well, I can't say that, you know, that's not, you know, my position. I don't want to say whether I support them. When I was trying to make the point, I mentioned apartment buildings, I think, in that case, but there are, you know, you have a main system that comes into one of those buildings that's distributed off. It comes into a main portion of the building. Everybody's contributing to the maintenance of that system through the HOA. You know, they have to have yearly inspectors that come in and do those inspections. It's not where everybody is on their own and they each have to do one of those. And that was the only point I was making, a little bit easier to control that way.
Because the follow-up to that then is, you're talking about choice and whether it's someone's choice to opt into it. In those situations, again, it's about maintenance of, you're going to assume that your neighbor is going to upkeep their alarm. You're going to assume that your neighbor's house isn't going to catch on fire, but yet it's right next to you. So there, you may choose to do what is right for you, but the choice of your neighbor is then affecting you, and the fact that they're sharing a wall with you becomes your problem.
Again, remember, that's the job of sprinklers is to allow people to get out of the house. It's not to prevent the house from burning down altogether. And I don't have all those statistics, you know, the meeting came up really quick for me, so I don't have all the statistics like I'm sure Paul can quote. But if the whole point is to allow somebody to get in and out of the house, it still can jump, you know, as the house gets engulfed and jump to the neighbors. That's not the purpose of what the sprinklers are trying to do for you. As far as I know, is to allow you to get out of your house, you know, in time to save your life.
Well, that's a big deal.
And as I said, I don't downplay that, but the question is, we make those choices all the time. We buy cars, we don't necessarily add the extra airbags that might help protect us and all those things. It's an individual choice, you know, to do those things. Is it worth another $23,000 in your house to go put those sprinklers in?
If it saves my life.
It could, but then we also come back and ask, and no disrespect to any firefighters or anybody else, how many of them have gone back and retrofitted their houses with sprinklers if it's such an important thing to go do? Not many.
We have no idea on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I add a clarifying point about the building codes? I think it might be misleading to say a number of states that have adopted a sprinkler mandate, because just like in Delaware, in many states, it's the local governments that adopt the building codes.
That's right.
So while a state may not have adopted it at the state level, throughout the country, many municipalities have adopted the ICC codes as presented without extracting the fire suppression requirement. And the ICC codes are the industry standard. I'm not going to say there's no lobbying. With any code, there could be lobbying, but the International Code Council is a nonprofit organization of building officials and people with backgrounds in building engineering, and they're the ones that develop the code. So I don't think it's necessarily as straightforward as it's been lobbied to get in. I mean, there's research and a lot of technical expertise that goes in. Our building official has his certifications through the International Code Council, and I'm sure he could tell you a little bit about the organization. I know when I was in Dover, the building official there was part of the group that voted on the code updates. So it is really building officials that are doing this. Again, as they're lobbying, I'm sure with any type of code organization, there's some lobbying, but it is a nonprofit organization.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sir, what was your last name again? I'm sorry.
It's Grani, Grahne.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rick, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, come on up.
Thank you. What a great town.
Rick, bring that speaker closer to you, just
What
thanks.
a great town. I just became aware of the issue a couple of days ago, and
Pull it closer, because I'm
Yeah,
hearing
you're
someone
good.
saying they can't hear
No,
you.
yeah.
Okay,
so
that's
I,
better.
right off the bat, I needed to form some armchair analysis or opinions. So I wanted to come here tonight with an open mind. And nobody, not one of us can argue against the loss of life. Not one of us can argue against safety. Not one of us can argue against the protection of our neighbors. I certainly would never do that. But this gentleman that just spoke, he had some legitimate concerns, and there was a lot of things that I thought about, but he's much more educated. He's a builder by trade, I'm not. I can speak to, I have a suppression system in my house, in my bed and breakfast, which obviously was mandated, and I'm glad we had it. We obviously never had to use it. I can tell you an instance a few years back, the pump went on it, and that's a few years back, and it took about a month and a half before, and I think you're right, there are, Newport and Wilmington, were the only places at that time I could find somebody who does that kind of work, repair work and maintenance. But there's a lot of issues involved with the suppression system. It's not, it's a great idea, but there's a lot of issues with it, a lot of maintenance issues, cost issues. That pump, I believe, cost about $2,500 just for the pump.
What kind of maintenance issues are you speaking?
Well, you have to have inspections, you have to, if you have a damage, or if you damage them, any of the heads or whatever. So I'm gonna tell you what happened in my property in a cold winter night. Thankfully, I was there. It was about 11:30, and I go downstairs to make sure everything was okay, and I see a gush of water coming out of my storage area. I'm up on pilings, this is, and I said, oh my God, I opened up the door, and the pipe, now there's also, by the way, you're right, they didn't have a shut-off valve with these systems, I believe, and I'm not that educated on it, but it's a direct line into the suppression system. So, they didn't provide a shut-off valve, so anyway, so I go down there and I said, what the hell, and I saw, and I don't know what the thickness is, it's a thicker plastic pipe that they use for the suppression system, but it was cracked. And it was gushing like a fire hydrant. And it's not like a 1 inch or half inch or quarter inch, whatever the diameter of your pipes are. It was unbelievable. So I called the City of Lewes, and we have a wonderful response team. Guy came out about 12 o'clock. Where's your shut-off valve? I told him what a shut-off valve, but there is not a shut-off valve, because it's directly from the water line, goes right in, it's always.
Is that an old system?
No, I don't know if it's old, but it's a pressure. You can't, if you have a shut-off valve in your system, if you had a fire, the only water that would come down is the water that's captured into the pipes internally.
Right.
So that makes sense, it's a constant flow in. That water ran for about 8 hours until early morning, because they did not know where the shut-off valve in the street was. And I'm not blaming anybody, they did not know, but I kid you not, they did not know, and they were frantic, the Lewes Public Works, because they said to me, we can't shut off the whole street. I said, that's your only remedy. And I said, thank God. I said, you gotta do it very early in the morning, hopefully before anybody gets up and is in need of water. So that's what was happening. So, look, so I looked up today what the cost of a suppression system, and there are two different suppression systems. I was just familiar with the water, I'm not familiar with the gas or whatever the other system is. And it said for new construction, 1 to 2. That gentleman was more accurate. He's involved in this, I couldn't tell you. Retrofitting was 2 to 7. If you're ever building something in this marketplace today, with the supply and demand, the labor force, you can throw all those numbers out the window, because it's gonna be much, much more. And the only thing I have to say is, if it's equitable and it's warranted, what statistics do we have in the City of Lewes? I get the news about that, and Andrew, I get townhouses, because I personally would want my neighbor to have one and me to have one. That's neighborly, regardless of the cost. But are we looking for a solution to a problem? Do we have it? Is there potential we can have it? Absolutely. Could it save lives if it did? Absolutely. But where do the costs factor in? And that's what a big thing is with people. And that gentleman's right. He's just going to pass it along. to the buyer. That's just as a fact. But there's all kinds of scenarios, and I don't want to get down to, I think government governs best when it governs least. I know you have to tackle tough decisions, and I know this is not an easy decision, you know. To me, if it's equitable, it's like if you're requiring it for new houses, whether it's townhouses, I think that's more warranted, or maybe apartments or condos. I definitely think I could not argue against that whatsoever. But on single-family homes, I just don't know if you're gonna do that, then where do you tell the people that already have homes, you're gonna have to retro too. You're gonna have to have skin in the game. And I guarantee you, I can't say that. I would think if you told people who had a lot of these houses are year old, if you told them they had to retrofit their house by code, it would be hell of a load.
Right.
So anyway, thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay. I personally own 2 systems that are in buildings, and I can tell you there is an annual maintenance cost.
Yeah,
But they also, and it's not insignificant, but,
Yeah.
yeah. But it is something that, protects life and limb. Yeah.
There's a handout.
I know there's a handout.
Oh, sorry.
We're gonna get to that in just one second. We do have Mr. Ed Bush, I believe.
Rush.
Okay, could we bring him up, Kaylee?
Hello.
Bobby, we'd be happy to.
Hi, Ed.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we
Yeah.
can hear you. You can also turn your video on if you wish.
How do I do that?
It should be right there on the lower part of your screen.
You know what? I thought normally I have a little thing that says I can, but you can hear me, right?
Right, we got you.
Yeah.
Go
All
ahead.
right, I'm not gonna waste time trying to figure out how to get my camera on.
Okay.
As long as you can hear me, that's fine. Yeah, my
We're
name's
good.
Ed Rush. I live in the Governor's Complex. I'm new to Lewis. I moved down last August. I have 45 years in the fire service. I'm a fairly new member of Lewis Fire Department, but I also work with Paul on the Delaware Fire Sprinkler Coalition. I've been involved in several, national fire organizations. And I don't even know where to begin to, talk about the misinformation that the guy, I'm sorry what his name was, the speaker before the last one presented. Starting with the fact, I believe he said something about Shell Brothers hasn't installed a sprinkler system. Well, I have one in my house that was installed by Shell Brothers. He's talking about $23,000. Mine was $8,000. And that was actually, I thought that was a little high, about $8,500. The last gentleman was talking about not having a shutoff. I'm not sure when or how his system was put in, but the code requires a shutoff. I have a separate in mine, so if a sprinkler head does go off, there's a panel in the closet that you just simply turn the valve and the sprinkler system goes off. I'm not sure where these numbers are coming from. You can get a sprinkler system installed for, around $2 a square foot. Mine was slightly higher, and I thought it was too high. I have a cousin who has a house with a sprinkler system. He retired from the same fire department I did in New York. He has a house in Schofield. He installed a sprinkler system in. And his cost he has a bigger house than mine, which, he'll tell you anytime you ask. His was a little more than $2 a square foot also. As far as maintenance, the annual maintenance is minimal. The area I came from in New York has required sprinklers in single-family homes for well over 20 years. I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I had to respond to a malfunctioning sprinkler system that caused, a water issue, and almost every one of those was caused by a freezing pipe. And, somebody else brought up the issue about pipes freezing if the heat goes off. If your sprinkler system pipes are going to heat, your regular water pipes, if your sprinkler pipes are going to break due to lack of heat, your regular water pipes are gonna break also.
Right.
Yes, it's additional piping in the house, but if you're keeping your house warm enough to keep your regular water, flowing, it's gonna keep the sprinkler systems flowing also. I'm just trying to remember what else was misinformation. Like I said, the annual maintenance, I have my brother-in-law has a house that he built 25 years ago with a sprinkler system because it's in that municipality. Like I say, very, very minimal maintenance, that, he pretty much does himself. Basically, it's a very quick inspection to make sure that everything's working. It's not much different than your regular domestic water system. And you don't have there's not a lot of maintenance on a regular domestic water system. But I think the thing that's being missed is, when houses were built, they talk about the ICC code. The sprinkler systems were put into the ICC code that corresponded to some other areas where there were sort of givebacks. And I'm not an expert on the code, but there's certain things where, all right, well, because you have sprinklers, you don't have to do this, and certain things like that. So you can't just remove sprinkler systems in a vacuum because you are downgrading the protection of that house. And to the point also about, yes, sprinkler systems are for life safety, but the fact of the matter is they do also, for the most part, put the fire out. The fire the other day in the Jefferson Apartments, I was there. It put the fire out. They found the sprinkler shut off. They shut it off within a couple minutes of arrival, and there was minimal damage. I mean, those people were probably back in their apartment that night. The state of Maryland has had a sprinkler code for quite a while. I went to a firefighter funeral last week for a firefighter that was killed in a house that was built 2 or 3 years before Maryland adopted the sprinkler code. He fell through the floor because the fire had been burning underneath, and by the time they got him out, he had basically cooked in the area where the fire was, that he had fallen into. He was on the radio asking for help. His last radio transmission was, "Tell my family I love them." And then they were finally able to get him out, but it was too late. And there's many stories of that. There's stories of, multiple people and families that have died from fires. Fires reach flashover in 3 to 4 minutes now with all these modern building materials. A house that was built 40, 50 years ago, it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes. Yes, that smoke alarm is going to give you plenty of time to get out. The modern houses burn so fast and so hot, that smoke alarm might not even give you enough time to get out of the house. So, yeah, we're talking about, it's going to cost you a few more dollars here. Yeah, it may take an extra couple of days to build a house. My house was built earlier than expected. I actually ended up having to rearrange my plans because my house was built earlier than expected. And they wanted me to move in earlier. You're talking about human life here of your residents and of your firefighters. As opposed to a couple of extra dollars and maybe an annual maintenance. And as to the question about it's an option, yeah, it's an option. And the law says that the builder has to show you some documentation that shows the benefits of a sprinkler system. So when I went to contract on my house, it was one of about 30 documents I signed in a half hour. It was buried in with all these other documents. There was no explanation. It was just, oh yeah, you can have a sprinkler system, just sign here. And I was like, no, wait a minute, I want one. But most people, yeah, they just sign and move on because it's the 23rd of 30 documents that you're signing. So there's no real explanation of the benefits of it as the law says. Now that's just the one builder I dealt with. Maybe other builders are actually handing out pamphlets that explain the benefit and all. But, we're talking about human life here, both residents and firefighters, and it's real. You know, the cost of doing this is minimal, the downside is minimal. So I really urge you to go with the national experts that put the ICC code together and not start piecemealing stuff out of it. Just adopt it as it is and leave the sprinkler code in there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. One of the things we've heard here this evening is the availability of people to service these systems. Have you had any difficulty locating someone to service your system? I realize you may have only been in your house a short period of time and you may not have had a chance or need to call for service yet. Were you informed of who could service your system at the time it was installed?
Oh, he's off.
He's still on. Mr. Rush, did you hear my question?
Yeah, it did. Somehow I got muted. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I have not had to do any kind of maintenance on it yet or any service on it. I literally, as of like 2 days ago, I've been in for a year.
Okay.
And so, but as far as I know, there is very little maintenance needed. I mean, I don't really plan on doing any maintenance, at least for a while, because there's really nothing to do other than, you look at the sprinkler heads and make sure nothing's leaking.
Okay.
It just doesn't happen. I'm not even sure if there is any required annual maintenance on it.
I can't speak to residential codes, but I know in commercial codes it's required annually.
Totally different. I'm very familiar. I was a code official in New York. And, we did we checked to make sure that the required annual sprinkler maintenance was done. And yes, that is completely different. And, there is a cost to it, and they have to do, every 5 years, they have to do a flow test. And,
Right.
every year they do a visual maintenance and all. That, as far as I know, that is not required on a residential sprinkler. It's up to the homeowner to, decide if they want it quote, checked out annually.
Yeah, in Delaware, it's required for mixed-use property, whether there's commercial on the first floor and residential above.
Mr. Rush, I have a question for you. Your uncle, I think you said, who lives in the adjacent neighborhood?
Yeah, my cousin, yeah.
Your cousin. Has he been in his home long enough to have to service his system or have it inspected?
He's been in about 3 years, and I'd have to double check with him, but I don't believe he's done anything with it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Austin, would you like to talk to us? I don't see any other hands at this point, or...
No?
Okay. We're going to tag team here?
The Austin and Charlie show.
So, we've been looking into this, we've had some discussions with the state fire marshal. And the state fire marshal, he reviews plans on commercial properties, institutional properties, apartment complex, townhouses. So they, for instance, will review Lewes Waterfront Reserve, but they don't have the manpower to review every single family residence system that gets built with a fire sprinkler system. What they do, and they've done this with Sussex County, is create a memorandum of understanding. They would do is with the city. And within the discussions with regard to that memorandum of understanding, the devil will be in the details of how that review would get done. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. There are fees related to the review.
Can you move the microphone closer?
Typically based on square footage of the residence. So anyway, that's the state fire marshal part of it. When we get, mostly what I've been involved with in the city is commercial or institutional establishments asking us, hey, do you have enough flow or pressure in your system to provide fire protection? And my answer is I can tell you what the flows and pressures are because we have the system completely modeled, and we can tell you pretty close what it is wherever they want to make that connection. But we're not fire engineers, and it's up to their fire and protection engineer to be able to say whether that flow or pressure is going to work for whatever facility we're talking about. And like other people have talked about tonight, typically a commercial or an institutional has a fire protection room with a fire pump, and so you know, it's not as important because you have those boosted pumps there. But for a residential house, we're working on standards right now. We're getting pretty close, I would say, on how a fire service line, it would be one service to each house with branches off to the fire service and to the domestic use. And both of them would have shut-off valves, so you'd be able to shut the system off. Fire service line would have backflow prevention, but we're still nailing down all the details. I think we're pretty close.
Well, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
to that, one of the things that we had talked about was, if you're coming off the same service and you basically have two valves or two pumps, you could label one that says fire suppression, so that
Right.
if somebody wants to shut off because we're transient, that they could go there and they know which exact one that they're shutting off, so they don't accidentally turn one or the other. Now, obviously, you know, mistakes happen, but if you label it, or if it's colored red, or whatever it may be, it helps identify it so that if they do go out and shut it off, they can. And one of the other things we talked about was, again, going back to the fire engineer, if the house is served off a 1-inch service, but the fire engineer comes back and says it really needs a 2-inch service just because of pressures, you never know. In that circumstance, do you require them to have a second tap with a dedicated 2-inch line? Or do they upgrade their service
Right.
to a 2-inch service?
Right.
And there's a cost associated with that
Exactly.
upgrade.
Correct. These are just all different.
So assuming you could use a 1-inch line, you would have one impact fee.
Yeah, the theory would be there would, and
Mr. Mike.
again, just as a preliminary, there wouldn't really be a second impact fee because there would be it wouldn't be a metered service.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
So it's basically the demand would be there when you have a fire.
On a need basis, yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Somebody said it earlier, and it's correct, that typically a 1-inch service can supply, for a typical house, 20 to 30 gallons per minute, which is enough to operate a
Right.
sprinkler system. There may be houses that are several stories high and really big that might need a larger service.
Right.
But those would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
And let me ask you, my question is to be directed basically to the redevelopment that we see going on in Lewes. And what I mean by that is the transition from modest cottages to much, much larger homes where the volume is tremendous inside these homes. Do we not have any homes that have been presently built that have fire suppression systems? I mean, people could be opting to have them without us requiring it of them. Has no one installed a system?
Tom Panetta has one.
Yeah, Tom.
It does have a dedicated
Yeah.
service, but
Okay.
it's not something, because it's 9 chances out of 10, it's not metered.
Right.
So,
Right,
Mr.
Mike.
Mike, please.
yeah.
I can
But-
tell you,
Go ahead.
go ahead, please.
I mean,
I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of any. I mean, even Tom's is a surprise to me. And the only thing that concerns me there is, like I mentioned before, we want to have backflow prevention on the fire service line. And so we want to make sure that we know about them.
Yeah, I think condos generally do in town, so over at Safe Harbor, I would imagine they do, and
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah, they do.
at Dennison Place.
Yeah, those we
all-
reviewed,
so
yeah.
there are
Right.
residential units that have.
Yeah, I understand, but I was thinking of single-family detached homes.
Oh,
you know,
Tom's the
that-
only one I'm aware of.
Right,
and it also depends on how it's tied in. I mean, if they're running a fire service off the standard
Right.
house service, right, you would never know it in theory, because
Right.
it's their service behind the meter.
Correct.
So if they're tapping in behind the meter, or
Or-
basically their side of the meter,
right.
You'd
Yeah,
never-
I understand, but if they are tapping on the street side, then yeah. Thank you.
Charlie, before you leave, I have a quick question. So we're talking about obviously new residential construction here. Would a home that has been scraped down to the foundation and rebuilt, or is there a home that's being remodeled substantially that would also qualify for a system? Or does it have to be absolutely new construction? I don't know if the other gentlemen have any opinion on that.
I don't think it has to be. It's just a matter they have to tap off the service line to create the fire protection.
I think what we're talking.
I'm talking about like new, what
we're talking-
qualifies as new
I
construction?
think anything that would be a
That's a
scrape
whole
would be new construction.
Okay, but if
Yeah.
like, let's say 50%
Right,
That's-
that's not what we're
It-
talking
The
about.
the way that it is in the IRC, International Residential Code, if we left the language in, it would only be for new construction. It would not be for, there are a number of things where a 50% renovation will trigger code compliance. This is not one of those
This
things.
is not one of them.
No.
That's my question, okay.
And that will probably be looked at as we move toward the 2021 code, because I do think that addresses retrofits, but at this point, we're only looking at it for new
See,
construction.
Mr. Eichler shaking his head, so maybe he wants to come back to the podium when you finish, Charlie.
I just want to put it out there that I am an engineer, but I'm not a fire protection engineer. So any review of a fire protection system should be done by the appropriate professional.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that, Charlie.
Yeah,
Thank you
okay.
very much, Charlie.
Paul, do you want to come back up and talk about the 21 code?
You could hardly sit still back there.
We got you started.
And that's fine, I greatly appreciate that. And thanks for the opportunity to come back up here. As you can tell, this conversation goes all over the place,
Right.
okay? So I would like to go back to the comments with regards to the state law that is in place at this time. That is a state law that was enacted in 2015. It was initiated by Representative Ed Oshensky out of Newark, and Senator Ennis out of Smyrna assisted him with that. Senator Ennis has a very strong fire service background, and Representative Oshensky has a fire sprinkler background. They came about and in conversations exactly with the fire marshal's office, wanted to get information out there with regards to the availability of sprinklers. Since it was in the code, since it's a safety aspect and such, the fire marshal walked the fine line of being able to assist the development of that information. However, as I mentioned, his office is excluded from specific oversight of single-family dwelling and townhomes. The law basically boils down to the simplicity of a brochure. As you heard Mr. Rush describe, it's in the flow of information. And we in the fire service absolutely depend upon the expertise of the builder to be able to present that information in an appropriate fashion. There's no oversight to that. We have no way of knowing, A, that it's presented. We have no way of knowing of what is presented during the conversation. There are builders who present it appropriately. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind. There are builders out there of which I can bore you further with the example that I have of the estimate on a 1,500 square foot home that is in the tens of thousands of dollars for a single family detached home, which the absolute intent of that quote, no zeros or decimals misplaced, was to dissuade that buyer from installing that system. So yes, the parameters do exist here in Delaware that it is a consumer choice, okay? And big government, small government, I'm not here for that conversation. His encounter of $8.15 a square foot for the sake of the installation of that system, if you listen to his description of it and such, and for the area which he's serving, Broadkill Beach, I'm not surprised in that it is a specific system designed for that one house. While they may have municipal water coming in here, he may mention of a tank and pump system. So we're mixing apples and oranges here. We talked about the retrofit conversation very briefly. Certainly you have a great resource here in town with Mr. Panetta. He was on the meeting months ago with regards to offering his information on that. So you have a great local resource with regards to that. And your question with regards to fire service members going back and retrofitting houses, well, I bought my house that was built in 1959. I have not retrofitted my house. If you take the simple act of looking up at the ceiling above you right now, you will see how this system was designed to be in this building with every other system that supports this building. Plumbing, electrical, so on and so forth. So yes, I can go back, I can put a tank and pump in my house. I can drill through the floors, I can have the piping come up and buy some nice, covering to it and such, if I choose to do so, and so far, I've chosen not to do so. Okay? We can talk about the aspects of smoke alarms again. And believe me, I don't mean to make light of anybody's situation. I don't mean to add on to anybody's troubles. But I'm very comfortable in suggesting that the pictures that were included in this week's Cape Gazette of the Peregrine Road fire, that family did not have any smoke alarm anywhere close to that garage. I don't know what the electrical code is for, providing for that. However, the amount of fire that's just shown in that one picture that completely consumes a 3-car garage tells me they did not have early notification with regards to that fire. Also, what I want to bring to your attention with regards specifically to that fire is the Lewes Fire Department responded. And for the amount of fire, the amount of manpower and apparatus that was required to take care of that fire, 4 other fire companies responded to that fire. Coverage to the area was provided by Bethany Beach. I don't know how far Bethany Beach is from here, but it's not convenient.
17 miles.
They were on set for 3 hours with regards to that. And again, hands down, I will tell you, you have a fantastic fire department serving this community, but your fire department is stretched thin at best. You can go anywhere in the state of Delaware and we'll have a conversation about the conversion of volunteer fire companies to combination and full career departments. So that's going to do nothing but add expense to every municipality at any level. You're going to talk about, the 3 hours being there. And for this family, maybe the only good aspect with regards to that fire is they were the only ones to call for service at that time frame, and these fire companies were available to come. Heaven forbid you're the second person to have to call in a community for service during that time frame, and how long you're going to have to wait, which brings us right back to the whole time conversation and such. The point with regards to who's around to provide installation and service to sprinkler companies, he is absolutely correct. There is a overwhelming majority of sprinkler companies that serve Delaware that are in the Newark area. However, and I believe Mr. Rush had this one organization that is out of Frankfurt that is available down here. You will talk to any sprinkler installation organization. There's only one in the state of Delaware that I'm aware of that is specifically dedicated to the building of business of residential installation. Everybody else does everything. The state fire marshal's office regulates who can install sprinkler systems, including residential. You'll be able to go through on the fire marshal's office website, the technical services area, and you can go to their whole menu and see who is allowed to do what, from design all the way to installation to maintenance. So that aspect of it is very closely controlled by the fire marshal's office. There are, and what my hope is, and part of my adventures with going through this, is that the sprinkler companies will have to meet the demand of residential installation, of which they will absolutely build and dedicate the resources to doing it properly, and that will drive the price down as well.
Okay.
So, with regards to that, I think I covered just about everything. Again, I cannot stress enough the aspect of just the impact that one fire makes, and I think you certainly will see this a lot more than I do. But you get the input back from your Board of Adjustments when people come and say, I'd like to knock down that 1,000 square foot Lewes cottage, and I'd like to build a 3,000 square foot. And you deal with the setbacks and the adjustments of all that, which in my world puts that house, which potentially can catch fire, closer to the neighbors. And as much as we want to have the conversation with regards to a person's home as their castle and the right to do everything, no one has the right to impact their neighbor as a result of having a fire. So, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Rick, you want to come back up?
Just very brief. Thank you. Rick Quill, Blue Water House. Yeah, you touched on it. If there's going to be it's really enlightening tonight. Thank you very much. I would hope that the gentlemen, the engineers touched upon it, the impact fees, that there should be a carrot for property owners potentially on impact fees. Because if you're going to, pass this ordinance or whatever, I think it would be soften the blow if there could be some consideration, because there will be expense, if you could give some consideration on the, the impact fees.
I think that would be a topic, since they establish their own, the BPW establishes their own rates, it's something we'd have to work with them to develop. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Mayor, can I just add, as an administrative matter, the state fire marshal, the state fire marshal's office implements the state fire prevention regulations. If this were adopted as part of the building code, it would be, the review and permitting would all be done through our building official's office.
Right, right.
Okay.
And do
Sir-
they have to go through special training to be able to do that, Amory? Are they properly trained
Well,
now?
so they go to the training for that's provided for their International Code Council certifications.
Right,
So they
That would
have
be-
access to
Yeah.
that.
that would be part
through
of it.
that.
Thank you.
I mean, they might have to go to Pennsylvania or
Sure.
something, because
Yeah.
we don't do much of it here.
Sir, did you have another comment?
The only thing I wanted to say is.
Pull the mic.
Please pull the mic up so we can
Sure.
get you on the recording.
With all respect to Mr. Rush, and listen, we're not here to, I don't have anything against firefighters or anything else, and we're all trying to build safe houses, believe me. But I think one of the things you have to realize is Lewes is an old town. Mr. Rush lives in a very new neighborhood, designed completely different. The house, as Paul mentioned, the one that I'm putting up on Broad Hill Beach, I'm using a system that's, decades old. Every house we do is unique. And that's what we have to deal with logistically every time. It's not, the big
Correct.
development, it's what we're doing, on a daily basis.
Right, okay.
It's a lot tougher, I think a lot of times we get into the shoot first and ask questions later. If you really look at all the logistics on how to make all of these little different pockets work, it's a much tougher problem than it appears to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate your time coming out tonight. Are there any other questions or comments from the table? No, I don't see, whoops, we got a hand up. Deborah Evalds has a question. Could you bring Deborah up? Oh, hey, Haley. Deborah, you're with us, I think, momentarily?
Yes, I am.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, and you know what? I won't even go to video because I'm not going to be long.
Okay.
Is this an opportunity to make a comment or just for a question?
Oh, you can do both?
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, my first comment would be following up on the last speaker, is that to compare the infrastructure in Broad Hill Beach to the infrastructure of City of Lewes is comparing, apples to grapes. So I don't know if that bears any relevance. I would just say that I would ask a question. Is the mayor and the council's duty to keep down home costs on new homes here in the city, or is it to protect the citizens and the firefighters who respond to these fires? And I personally think the duty of our council and mayor is to look out for our citizens' best interests. I think we all know that new homes in Lewes today are extraordinarily expensive. Everything in Lewes is extraordinarily expensive. If you get past just the land cost, we've all been in lots of new homes in Lewes, in the city, and they are luxurious with all sorts of amenities. So I don't think that requiring new construction to have a safety system is excessive. When most of these homes do have many, many, many amenities and sprinklers on their lawns. The other concern I have is one that Councilman Ritzer brought up, which is about the smaller homes being replaced with much larger homes. We're talking about really high lot percentages that are being covered now. Yes, within code, but still high. And these are large homes. If you're talking about down on the beach with the allowable, extra height, you need to get significant fire equipment in there. And if we're talking about side by side with 8-foot setbacks on either side. I don't know if that's enough, and I would certainly like to see built-in protections, mostly to protect our Lewes firefighters, many of whom are volunteers. You know, and the last thing is that when we're talking about these new homes that are built to a high standard, the original argument was that there could be problems with these systems going off during unoccupied times. But I was a second homeowner once, and we didn't always turn off our water. And it sounds like the sprinkler systems would be in insulated areas. So I think that becomes a pretty moot point. So that's all I'd like to add to this. And thank you for the due diligence that you are putting forth on this issue. I think it's very important.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Deborah.
comments. Okay, it looks like Mr. Rush has another comment. Mr. Rush, you want to come back up? Kaylee?
No, I hadn't raised my hand again.
Okay, you just showed up as a new click.
Oh,
Okay. All right, are there any other comments from the table here this evening?
I'm not gonna raise my hand.
I think it's been a very good conversation here. This will be considered at our September 13th regular mayor and city council meeting. And I would suggest that we keep the public comment period open until noon on September the 10th, which is the Friday prior to our meeting. So anyone wishing to make additional comment could submit it in writing to us prior to noon on September the 10th. Is there anything else to bring forward here this evening?
No.
Hearing nothing, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
So
So moved.
Because we have that all over the table, so we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming
How
out
you doing?
tonight.